Welcome, my friends, to a world of pain and suffering, also known as theorizing in Five Nights at Freddy's. I hope you've all had a decently good day, and hopefully the theory we'll be discussing doesn't entirely ruin it. That said, there's something I've always wondered about, and that's the fact that FNAF 3 has two endings. That's not inherently a surprising thing. Nowadays, it's somewhat common for FNAF games to have multiple endings. FFPS, Security Breach, and Into the Pit, for example, all have various different endings. Usually, it's not hard to tell which ending is canon and which ending isn't. Again, for example, Sister Location's main game has two endings, and if you brighten up the black screen at the end of the credits, you'll see text at the bottom that either says real ending or fake ending, depending on which route you've taken during your playthrough of the game. Spoilers, the ending where you get your insides scooped out is the real ending. But FNAF 3 most certainly started this trend of different endings. The bad ending is the ending you get if you simply play the game like you normally would without completing these secret minigames that result in Happiest Day. The good ending, and I use that term loosely, is the ending you get when you've achieved Happiest Day and all the souls are, well, freed isn't the term I'd use, but you get the idea. Oddly enough, Happiest Day isn't what we're going to be focusing on today, not the complicated details and implications of it at least. If you've ever seen any of my theories, then you'll know I've gone in depth about all that a lot as is. So if you want a breakdown of all that nonsense, you can check out those videos. Beyond that though, there's something else I'd like to mention, and it's from the Scott Cawthon Darko interview from a few years ago.
Was when things went a little bit crazy with like the mini games and stuff and the good ending and the bad ending. If you can answer this, which ending really happened?
I've given a lot of thought as to whether or not I should answer this question.
Okay.
And I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the answer is very interesting.
Okay.
You know? The answer is very interesting. The answer is complex.
Okay.
However, I'm not going to answer it.
So, at the very least, the answer to the question, which ending of FNAF 3 really happens, is an interesting one in Scott's own words. It would also be a complex answer, apparently, which in of itself isn't necessarily a surprise considering every other mystery in this franchise. That's kind of just par for the course. But the fact Scott felt inclined to say this instead of a more specific answer is telling in of itself, in my opinion. I know what you're thinking, of course. It's definitely not the first time Scott's ever been vague, but apparently the answer to the question which ending happened is more complicated than just saying a specific ending, of which there are only two. What could be so complicated that confirming a concrete answer or solution would be interesting for a word? Now you could argue that Happiest Day itself is pretty complex, and so confirming that would be a can of worms, but FNAF World also already kind of does that for us via the clock minigames. But what if I told you that Happiest Day isn't just the canonical ending of FNAF 3? What if I said both endings are canon? Yeah, I know, sounds like something a madman would say, but to be fair, I haven't been sane in years. But how could I prove such a wild claim? Well, firstly, let's put FNAF 3 aside and turn our attention to a little story called The Week Before. In The Week Before, we play as Ralph. Yes, we play as him because the book is actually an interactive novel. Throughout the book, there are multiple different routes and even endings that you can achieve, some of which require certain objects and items that you've gathered on your playthrough. Something very interesting about this book, however, is that it basically has the video game equivalent to New Game Plus. During your read-through of The Week Before, you may come across something called the bonus item, which you find on the corpse of a woman named Bronwyn. This bonus item is, oddly enough, a mobile phone. Upon scrolling through the contacts, Ralph sees options labeled deep dish, backstage, dining area, and restrooms. Essentially, this phone has the numbers for every phone in the restaurant and even employees that work at Freddy's. I also want to point out that this happens on night 6, which again is odd considering that we know Phone Guy dies before ever getting that far within the first game. But even then, it's entirely possible for Ralph to also survive night 5 and go home without coming back for night 6. He only does that upon finding out what the animatronic animatronics are planning. But something to note about all the endings where Ralph makes it out, they don't tend to end with the same "the end" card that the route that shows us his game accurate death does. Even the endings where Ralph and his daughter are attacked by Foxy but are able to fend him off end with game over instead of the end, and give you the opportunity to restart the night or the book entirely. Funnily enough, the only ending in the book that doesn't let you restart the night or from the beginning of the book is the ending where Phone Guy dies just as he did in the game. But in order to get that ending, you have to have acquired the mobile phone from Bronwyn, which you can't have done if you haven't gone down that particular path. If you're having a bit of trouble following what I mean, basically you can't have gotten the mobile phone from Bronwyn if you're going for the ending where Phone Guy dies the same death from FNAF 1. But there is a catch to all of this, and I do believe this is the technical canonical route of the week before. If you choose to flip all the switches of the access panel down, then proceed to lure the animatronics back to the stage with a music performance, Golden Freddy will appear and do his usual mischievous laughter before suddenly getting up close and personal with Ralph. Ralph hears an angry onslaught of "it's me's," followed by a much softer voice that reassures him that he did it and that his daughter will be safe now. The assumption would be that, presumably, Ralph died. But the story doesn't actually say that here. Yeah, Golden Freddy starts screaming in his face, but the book describes it as him going to sleep. This is followed by a "the end" title card with asterisks surrounding it. This is where we also get the choice to empty our inventory of everything except the mobile phone before we start a brand new adventure. Now that we have the bonus item, we're now able to do certain things that were originally inaccessible to us, such as being able to call different phone stations around the restaurant in order to distract animatronics. Or, you know, record messages for the next guy that's going to take your place as the night shift security guard after you die. The usual solution I've heard is that Ralph just remembered to bring his mobile phone for this route, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. Quote, you take out your mobile phone. The battery indicator is low. You've been using it intermittently for days and you don't have the right charger for it. Hopefully it can get you through the rest of the week. The implication is that Ralph doesn't have a charger that works for this phone, cause if he did, he'd be charging it after every night of work when he returns home. So what am I even getting at here? Well, if it isn't obvious already, I'm basically saying that the canonical route / ending of the week before is the one where he stops the animatronics' plan to escape before getting jumped by Golden Freddy. I'm also saying the ending that depicts his FNAF 1 death is also canon. It just happens after the aforementioned ending. So did Ralph time travel? Are we talking different timelines here? What's the deal, right? Well, although I hesitate to say time travel per se, I do think it all comes down to Golden Freddy. It's been long theorized that Golden Freddy's supernatural powers are even greater than we might have originally thought. Games like FNAF World and even Ultimate Custom Night toy with the idea of aspects of FNAF being told or explained in abstract or even meta ways. Ironically, it's in both those games Golden Freddy has some sort of strange presence in it. We'll get to it a bit later, but interestingly, FNAF World is also the game that helps set up Happiest Day. Just keep that in the back of your mind for now though. Switching gears back to FNAF 3 for the moment, I think something very similar happens here. During FNAF 3's in-between night minigames, you play as the 4 classic animatronics in a rundown version of the FNAF 1 establishment. One by one, they get dismantled by William Afton. But if you neglect to instantly follow Shadow Freddy, you may stumble across some hints as to how you're supposed to get the second ending of the game. Each night as you're playing a different character, you'll find these different clues in the left hallway leading to the security office. An arcade button sequence, 4 shadow cupcakes, a number code, and even RXQ. Putting aside the fact that the game has been out for years now, you generally wouldn't be able to get the good ending of FNAF 3 without playing through the game once and getting the bad ending. In order to find these clues, you have to have played through the game at least once. Again, barring that good ending guide you probably have pulled up on your phone. But as mentioned God knows how many times before at this point, FNAF World also has ties to this game. It is Glitch Bear, a pixelated funky version of Fredbear, that sends us on the quest to complete those clock minigames. So what does this all mean? Once again, I think both the bad ending of FNAF 3 and the second ending of FNAF 3 are canon. They both happened. I think the bad ending most likely happened first, but afterwards we've now gotten the necessary information to go back and get the happiest day ending. Okay, but how is that possible here? Is it Golden Freddy again, like I said it was in the week before? I could believe a world where it is Golden Freddy, especially considering that whole FNAF world thing. I think Golden Freddy makes the most sense, especially if we go with the idea that there are two souls inside Golden Freddy, and that the child we give cake to in Happiest Day is the crying child. However, I'm about to take this one step further and probably lose everybody that might have been on board with all of this. Like I mentioned before, FNAF does have an element of meta-ness to it. The entirety of FNAF world, the way you access FNAF 3's secret mini-games, and even the VR games being such accurate recreations of the original games, because they're based on in-universe games that are basically those original games. But what do all of those things have in common? What does the entirety of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise have in common amongst every installment? Not just the games, but the books as well. Us, the fans, the players of these games, and the readers of these books. When you play Ultimate Custom Night, who is the one that controls the difficulty level of the 50 animatronics available? You do. You're the one that decides which animatronics are active and how hostile they are. Now, that's not to say we're the ones in control of UCN. Feel free to still debate on whether it's Andrew or Cassidy, but from a meta video game standpoint, we are the ones that decide those aforementioned factors. In the same vein, we're the ones that click on those wall tiles and on that balloon boy drawing in FNAF 3. In the interactive novel the week before, we are literally controlling Phone Guy's actions and what path he takes throughout the book. It's only when he reaches his ultimate end that we are unable to bring him back and redo it once more. We are a character within the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. But does that mean everything I said about Golden Freddy isn't true? Not at all. I simply think two things can be true at the same time. It's a case of there being an in-universe explanation for something, but if you look further ahead just a bit, there can be a meta explanation for something as well. In any story that features a meta aspect, there is sometimes an in-universe answer that acts as something more tangible for the actual characters to grasp and understand. Happiest Day, if you are someone who believes that is when the children's spirits are freed, is a much more abstract way of depicting them being set free and moving on. But then we have the FNAF 6 ending, and that is a much more physical and literal depiction of such an idea as the fire engulfs their metal bodies, which, in turn, destroys the prisons keeping those souls bound. Even if you don't think Happiest Day is when the ghosts are freed, it's still something that is accessed and achieved by us clicking on a puppet drawing through the camera monitor. Again, pretty meta. To that end, I do still think it's Golden Freddy doing some weird supernatural paranormal stuff in the week before that allows for both those routes I talked about earlier to be canon. I also think the one behind FNAF 3's duo endings is Golden Freddy as well, with the assumption being that the child we see in Happiest Day is one of the two souls inside Golden Freddy. Then, from a meta perspective, we, the player, are what aids in these steps being accomplished. Now, when we see the puppet in Happiest Day, that doesn't mean it isn't the puppet. It can still be them even as we control the character. The thing about meta aspects in storytelling is that, duh, we are this 8-bit sprite, but was that factor always an intention, you know? More so when I talk about this meta-ness here, I'm referring to how we go about accessing these mini-games. That and us being the ones who click restart. This is all very odd, of course, and ultimately, what does it do for the story overall? It does nothing. Not really. I said it before and I'll say it again. I'm decently sure Scott regrets adding a meta aspect to FNAF at all.
And I had to make something more lighthearted. And in hindsight, what I should have done is, I should have used that for a troll game, or I should have, made something like, Foxy Fighters. I should have just done something that was obviously for fun and not tried to somehow tie it in to a canon game.
But even if you want to remove the whole the player has agency thing from this theory, I still think both endings of the week before happened, and I think the same applies to FNAF 3 thanks to, once more, Golden Freddy. At the very least, I am confident in that concept for the week before, so maybe I shouldn't have titled this video I Solved FNAF 3's Ending or whatever, but hey, hopefully it does better than my last theory. In any case, I hope hope you enjoyed this theory at least a small bit. By now, most people have dug into the week before and made theories on it, so for a while I really wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about regarding it. But through every theory I've seen involving the week before, I haven't seen a satisfying answer to which ending may be canon. Is my answer any better? Well, to each their own, right? Feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions, or your own theories down below in the comments. If you're really feeling generous, I'd also appreciate a like and a subscribe, but I'm not picky. Either way, I thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have a good day or a good night, whichever it is for you. Without further ado, I will see you all next time. Peace out.